So who is the best team or the best teams in the Big 12 conference and who is going to bring up the rear? That's exactly what I'm going to talk about, and I'm going to do it in tears right after this word from my sponsor. Since 1931, the attorneys at Katz, Cantor, Stone Street, and Buckner have been the voice for victims who have suffered serious injury or death. They have a fierce passion for truth and justice and a sincere compassion for those who have been wronged by others. Whether you have been in a car accident or fighting with an insurance company, or you or a loved one has suffered serious injury or death due to medical negligence, we will ensure your voice is heard loud and clear. Katz, Cantor, Stone Street, and Buckner will ensure there is justice for all West Virginians because we are your lawyer, your voice. Visit us at yourlawyeryourvoice.com. What is up? Come on in, make yourself comfortable, belly yourself up to the bar, and let me pour you out another shot of top shelf college football content. You have found yourself on another episode of Couz's Corner. If you are new here, I am your host, Couz. And yes, that is a nickname, but I'm your host here at Couz's Corner. Thank you for stopping in. I am rating the Big 12, and I'm doing it in tiers. It seems to be that most people prefer a tier rating system versus doing like a 1 through 16 rating. And to be honest, I enjoy doing it. So I thought, hey, we're going to do tiers, and we're going to talk about who are the top teams, who's the top shelf of the Big 12, who is the well of the Big 12, who's bottom shelf, and then who falls in the middle. That's what we're doing today, and I'm going to break down some of these teams a little bit. I'm not going, deep into the weeds with this video. Just going to kind of touch on the surface. Hopefully, I'll get more into the weeds and with more details on future videos with certain teams. But let's jump right in. All right, now let's start off with the top shelf teams, or team in this case, in the Big 12. And that's right, I said team. Because when you look at what this team has coming back, when you look at their schedule, which is arguably the easiest schedule in the conference, and you look at who they have at quarterback, who they have at head coach, I have this team actually going 11-1 overall this year, with their only loss being on the road in Stillwater to Oklahoma State. And I have them going, obviously, with a 11-1 record overall. I have them going 8-1 in conference, playing in Arlington for the Big 12 championship and probably winning it. And that is the Utah Utes. I have the Utah Utes as top shelf of the Big 12. And I'm going to be honest with you. Because I'm basing this on my projected record of these teams, that is the only team I have as top shelf. The reason being, I think there's going to be a logjam behind Utah. This doesn't mean I think Utah's head and shoulders above everybody else necessarily, but when you look at their schedule just lays out perfectly for them. They avoid West Virginia. They avoid Kansas State. They avoid Kansas. Their toughest games are at Oklahoma State, at home against TCU, and at home against Arizona. So the only one I have them dropping there is the game at Oklahoma State. And for that reason, I have them sitting atop of this conference at season's end. Now, obviously, they have Brent Keithy coming back from injury, their star tight end. They have Cam Rising, the star quarterback, coming back. Kyle Whittingham, one of the best head coaches in college football, one of the most tenured coaches in college football. That defense is going to be good again. I think they're going to come in year one ready to play in the Big 12. Now, let's go on to the contenders category. This is a logjam of teams here. I have 4 teams that could finish the season at 7-2 and tie for second place in this conference. The first one on my list is a team I'm really high on, and I don't think is getting enough love. That is the Iowa State Cyclones. When I look through their schedule, I see a lot of winnable games on the schedule for Iowa State. I do have them finishing the season 9-3 overall, and I have them finishing 7-2 in the conference, with their 2 conference losses being an away game at Kansas and an away game against Utah. But I have them winning all the rest of their games. They do have to play Kansas State at the end of the year in what I think will be a very tough game, the Farmageddon game. That game could determine who plays in Arlington against Utah. And I have them winning that game because it is at home in Ames. They have Rocco Beck coming back at quarterback, who showed he's a very talented player. They have Abu Sama coming back at running back. They have a very talented wide receivers. They have, that John Heacock defense is going to be good. Now, there is a question mark a little bit about their offense. They do have a new offensive coordinator coming in, because last year's offensive coordinator went off to the NFL. So there are a few question marks there. So maybe I'm too optimistic about Iowa State. You let me know in the comments, but I do have them as a contender because of what they have returning for that team, which is just about everybody. Now, the next contender, the next contender, which is number 2 on my list, and I think will also be tied for second place with a 7-2 record in conference, is the Kansas State Wildcats. I think Kansas State, a lot of people have Kansas State picked to win the league. They have quite a few guys returning as well. A lot of high hopes in sophomore quarterback Avery Johnson. Kid is extremely talented. Might be the most talented quarterback in the Big 12. That's arguable, but very well could be. Can run it, can throw it, can do a little bit of everything. Very small sample size, though. So to me, there are still a lot of question marks around Avery Johnson because of his lack of experience. They had no players on the All Big 12 first team, but they do have Chris Kleiman as their coach, and I think their schedule is very manageable. So I have them going 10-2 overall and 7-2 in conference, with their only losses being the last game of the season at Iowa State. I do have them dropping a game in Morgantown to the Mountaineers as well. So that is the only 2 losses I have for Kansas State. Now, another team I have as a contender, and another team I have going 7-2 in the conference, and another team who returns a lot of production from last year, a team who made it to Arlington for the Big 12 title game last year, and that's Oklahoma State. I do have Oklahoma State as the only team who beats Utah this year. I do have them knocking off the Utes in Stillwater, but Oklahoma State's schedule is pretty tough. They do have to go to Kansas State. They do play West Virginia at home. I do have that as a win, though. They have to go to TCU, which I think will be a tough game. I think TCU might be better than people expect. And they have to play at Baylor, at BYU, and again, they play Utah. So a very tough schedule for Oklahoma State. But I do think they're a good team. They have a lot of pieces coming back, including Ollie Gordon. The only reason I may not have them in the top shelf category, too many questions surrounding Alan Bowman. Just not sure he's a good enough quarterback to be a top shelf team in the conference. But I do think they have a really, really strong chance of getting to Arlington and competing for the Big 12 title. Again, a lot of returning pieces. A lot of good players on defense, with Colin Oliver being one of the key pieces there. And, of course, Mike Gundy. Hard to bet against Mike Gundy. The guy just always seems to overachieve in Stillwater. The fourth team I have in the contender category is the other team I have finishing 7-2. And this one surprised me. I actually did not expect to have this team finishing 7-2 until I sat down and went through the schedule. And that team is the TCU Horned Frogs. They went 5-7 last year. So this might surprise some of you. Heck, it surprised me, like I said, but they have Josh Hoover coming back at quarterback, who Coach Sonny Dykes is extremely high on. He says this may be the best quarterback he's coached, or at least one of them. Sonny Dykes isn't the type of guy that says things off the cuff. So I think he means it. He's extremely high on this team he has coming back. I don't think enough people are talking about TCU. When you look at TCU, they have 16 starters coming back from last year's team. Yes, they finished 5-7, but they have a lot of experience coming back, and they had a lot of close losses last year. A lot of the games they lost, the one against West Virginia comes to mind. They lost it in the final minutes of the game. West Virginia had to block a couple kicks in that game to win it. Just one example. A lot of close losses for TCU last year. They're always talented at skill positions. My question with them is, can they hold up at the lines of scrimmage? I think they can, and I think Sonny Dykes is a good football coach, and I think he'll have them playing good football this year. The schedule lines up pretty well for them, and I have them finishing out the year at 10-2 overall, with their only 2 losses being at Utah and at Kansas. So, but again, the schedule lines up nice. They play UCF at home. They play Texas Tech at home, Houston at home, Oklahoma State, another tough game, but they get that one at home. And they get Arizona at home. So some of their tougher opponents they get in Fort Worth. And I think that bodes well for TCU, and I think they end up finishing 10-2 on the year. Now, let's move down to the next category of in the conversation. Now, these teams could very well end up as a contender and are capable of making it to Arlington, in my opinion. And there's 3 teams in this tier. And the first one is my West Virginia Mountaineers. I have West Virginia finishing the season 8-4 overall, 6-3 in the Big 12. They are returning a lot of production from last year, and I do think they will be a better football team overall in 2024. But the problem is they might have the toughest schedule in the league. They have to play 5 of the top 6 teams preseason, 5 of the 6 top teams preseason in this conference, and they do it in back-to-back weeks. Let me go through this middle of the schedule here for West Virginia. Week 4 of the season, they have Kansas coming to Morgantown. They do get a bye after that. Then they have to travel to Stillwater to take on Oklahoma State. Then they come back to Morgantown to take on Iowa State. Then they stay at home to take on Kansas State. Then they travel out west to take on Arizona. So they play Kansas, Oklahoma State, Iowa State, Kansas State, Arizona, all in consecutive games. Now, they do close out the season a little bit easier, at least on paper, with Cincinnati, Baylor, UCF, and Texas Tech. But that middle of the season stretch is going to be a gauntlet, and that doesn't even include the preseason non-con games they have to play against Penn State and Pitt. So this team could very well be physically worn down by the time they get to the end of the year. Now, West Virginia does typically finish strong, so I see them finishing strong, but I think that middle stretch of the season is going to be tough, and I think they lose a few of those games to finish 6-3 in conference and 8-4 overall. Next team in the conversation to me, another team who I have going 6-3 in the league, is the Kansas Jayhawks. Now, I originally had Kansas in the contenders tier, but man, them losing Andy Kotelnicki at offensive coordinator to me is going to be a big loss for them. I don't think enough people are talking about that. They got Jeff Grimes coming in, the former Baylor OC. I don't have a whole lot of confidence in Jeff Grimes. I'm sorry. The teams that Jeff Grimes has won with were extremely talented at Baylor, and it was guys that, correct me if I'm wrong, Baylor fans, but I'm pretty sure it's guys he didn't recruit that were there under the Matt Rule era. So, yes, he can coach up offense, but he needs to have the talent to do it, and I'm just not sure Baylor has the talent, or I'm not sure Kansas, has the talent to do it. Andy Kotelnicki was able to scheme up a lot of things. Not that Kansas doesn't have good players. They definitely have a good player in Jalen Daniels, quarterback, but I just don't know that Kansas has the talent across the board to be one of the top teams in the conference without Andy Kotelnicki. And I hate to say it. Now, if Jalen Daniels stays healthy, they could end up being the top team in the league because they do have a fairly easy schedule. They have to go to West Virginia to start the season. I have that as a loss. Then they come home to face TCU. Then they have to travel out west to Arizona State. They get a bye. Then they play Houston. They go to Kansas State, at home against Iowa State, at BYU, at home against Colorado, and then at Baylor. So they avoid a lot of the top teams in the conference. They avoid Oklahoma State, for example. They avoid Utah. So they avoid a lot of the top teams in the conference, and most of their better games or tougher teams are at home. Now, the thing, too, is, though, with Kansas, they're not playing any games in Lawrence this year. Their stadium is being renovated, so they're having to use the Kansas City Chiefs Stadium and then I think another stadium to play games in. So they're not playing any true home games this year. So that's interesting as well. But I do have them finishing 9-3 overall and 6-3 in the Big 12 to be in the conversation for a conference championship appearance. The last team I have in this tier is the Arizona Wildcats. Now, the Arizona Wildcats coming into the first year coming into the Big 12, they have probably the best quarterback receiver duo in the conference with Tetairoa McMillan and Noah Fafita, the receiver and the quarterback respectively. But they have a new coaching staff. Anytime there's a new coaching staff, there's going to be questions. Can they perform up to the same level they did under Jed Fish? I have my doubts there, but I do have them as a good team. I do have them finishing at 6-3 in the league and at 8-4 overall in the 2024 season. So they're going to be a good, solid football team. I'm just not sure there'll be a 10-win team like they were a year ago when you have a new staff coming in. But the fact they do have that talented quarterback receiver duo, that alone could win them some games. So I have them finishing 8-4 and 6-3 in the league. Now let's drop down to the pretenders category. I have basically 3 teams in this category, and these are teams that I have finishing at 4-5 and 3-6 in the conference, with losing records in the conference, but good enough, likely, to be bowl eligible, or at least right on the cusp of bowl eligible. And the first one I have in that category is the UCF Knights. Now, a lot of people have UCF as their dark horse to win the league. I'm not quite there yet. I think UCF is still 1 year away from having the depth they need in the trenches to compete for a conference championship. and they're losing a lot of star power on that defensive line this year. So I think that may hurt them. They do have KJ Jefferson coming in from Arkansas to play quarterback, who I'm really high on, and I think Gus Malzahn will be able to do a lot of good things with him. They have R.J. Harvey, the talented running back. They have talented wide receivers. So that's the skill positions. I think they're fine, but I question their defense and their O-line play. I think their O-line play will be okay. I don't think it'll be elite. I think it'll be solid. And I do think they'll be able to run the football and probably even throw the football. But defensively, I think they're going to have to score a lot of points to beat people. And I'm just not sure they'll be able to do that week in, week out. So I have them finishing 4-5 in conference and 6-6 overall on the 2024 season. So I do have them making a bowl game for the second straight year. But again, falling one game short of a winning record in conference. The next team I have in the pretender tier, the Cincinnati Bearcats. Now, the Cincinnati, I was actually surprised that I had them this high because going in, I didn't think they'd be that good, but I think they have a fairly favorable schedule. I really, really like the running back, Kiner. It's going to be in the backfield. He's the one running back. For some reason, nobody's talking about Corey Kiner, the running back at Cincinnati. He could be the best running back in the league. And I know that's saying a lot with Ollie Gordon. Well, let me back up. He's not the best running back in the league, but I think should be in the conversation for one of the best backs in the league. And you very rarely hear his name mentioned. You hear Taj Brooks. You hear the two guys from West Virginia. You hear about Devin Neal at Kansas. You hear about DJ Giddens at Kansas State, but not enough people are talking about Corey Kiner. He can flat out run the football. On the defensive end, they have Dante Corleone, who, yes, he's had some health issues. There's been some questions about whether he'll play or not, but according to Coach Scott Satterfield at Media Days, he will be playing more than likely in the 2024 season. So it looks like they've been able to treat his condition, which I think was blood clots in the lungs, reportedly. But he seems to think he's going to be able to play at a high level. And I really think he might be the best defensive tackle in this conference. So I think Cincinnati ends up finishing the season with an overall record of 6-6 and finishing 3-6 in the league. So I'll have them making a bowl game in year 2 of Scott Satterfield. The next team in the pretender category and the last one in this category is the Baylor Bears. Now, Baylor finished last year with only 3 wins. I do think they improve on that this year. I think they fall one game short of a bowl game, though. I think they finished 5-7, and I think they finished 3-6 in conference. I like the addition of Jake Spavital at offensive coordinator. I like the fact that Dave Aranda is taking over the play calling on defense. Still question marks to me at quarterback. Not sure how good DeQuan Finn, the quarterback from Toledo, is going to be. They speak highly of them, but again, it's yet to be determined. I do like what they've done on the coaching staff. I like the fact that they are now embracing NIL, but I still think they're a year away from having the talent they need to make a bowl game. But I do think they're heading in the right direction. And I think if you give Dave Aranda, Jake Spavital, and this staff time, I think they'll get back to their winning ways in 2025. Now, let's move on to bottom shelf. These are the 2 teams I have finishing with records of 2-7 in the conference, okay? There are 2 teams in this category. The first one is the Texas Tech Red Raiders. I actually have Texas Tech finishing 7-5 overall, but that's because of their non-conference schedule. Their non-conference schedule is at home against Abilene. They go to Washington State, who I think they can beat, and then they play at home against North Texas. Should be a win there. And then they actually have them finishing 5-0 overall to start the year because I have them beating Arizona State at home to start Big 12 play, and I have them beating Cincinnati at home, their second game of Big 12 play. But from there on out, I only have them winning 2 more games the rest of the way. Out of their next 7 games, 5 of them are on the road, and they are against, listen to these road games, at Arizona, at TCU, at Iowa State, and at Oklahoma State. I don't have them winning any of those games. And I have them dropping a home game to West Virginia to close out the season. I do love Taj Brooks at running back. Bear Morton has been a good quarterback, but he's been injury prone. Can he stay healthy for another year? But I just think Joey McGuire is at least another year away from competing for a conference championship. I do like his recruiting. I do think he's bringing in some good talent, but I just don't think they're there yet on defense and on the lines of scrimmage. I think they have more work to do there. And for that reason, I have Texas Tech finishing 7-5 overall, but only 2-7 in Big 12 play, and so I have them as a bottom shelf team in the Big 12. Next one, bottom shelf. Going to piss a lot of people off, but this is the Colorado Buffaloes. I just do not like what Coach Prime's doing there as far as the roster turnover he's seeing. I just think building a roster that way, to me, is just not the way to go in college football. Now, he could prove me wrong. I think Shedeur Sanders is arguably one of the best quarterbacks in college football. I think Travis Hunter might be the best player in college football overall, the way he's able to play on both sides. They're going to have talent on that team, but I just don't think they have enough time to gel together. And their schedule's not doing them any favors. I mean, when you look at their schedule, first off, overall, I have them finishing 6-6. Or I'm sorry, I have them finishing 4-8 again this year and going 2-7 in the league. But I have their only wins out of conference. I have them beating North Dakota State to open the season, and I have them winning Game 3 over Colorado State on the road. The only conference win I have them with, or only two conference wins, are at home against Baylor and at home against Cincinnati. I think they will just be more talented than those two teams, and they are at home, so I have them winning them. But when you look at the rest of their conference slate, man, it's brutal. They're at UCF, at home against Kansas State, at Arizona, at Texas Tech, at home against Utah, and at Kansas, and at Oklahoma State to finish the year. So they have, just like West Virginia, they have to play most of the top teams in the league. So I just think it's going to be a tough road to hoe for Coach Prime and this staff and this team in year one of the Big 12 when they haven't had continuity on their roster or on their coaching staff for that matter. They have new coaches there as well at the coordinator spots. So, again, I have them as a bottom shelf team in the Big 12, but I could be proven wrong. Now, let's move into the last tier, which is the well of the Big 12. These are teams who are going to finish either 1-8 or 0-9. I actually have an team going 0-9 in this league. The team I have going 0-9 is the Houston Cougars. I have them winless in Big 12 play this year, and I have them as with an overall record of 2-10. I just think too much to do. They only have 6 returning starters from last year. Brand new coaching staff coming in with Willie Fritz. But I do love the hire of Willie Fritz, but it's going to take him a couple of years to get this roster where it needs to be to compete at the Power 5 level. They do have Donovan Smith at quarterback. That's one of the players they do have coming back that should help them stabilize a little bit. I have them starting the year off with a win over UNLV at home. Then they have to go to Oklahoma. What a non-conference game, right? I have them losing that one, obviously. Then they play Rice at home. I have them winning that one. Then I have them dropping the rest of the games on their schedule. Listen to this conference slate. At Cincinnati, at home against Iowa State, at TCU, at Kansas, at home against Utah, at home against Kansas State, at Arizona, at home against Baylor, and at BYU. Now, it's possible they could beat BYU because I'm not real high on them either, as you'll see here in a minute. But it's at BYU. It's in Provo. Really tough place to play. I just don't see it. So I have Houston. Again, they're a couple years away. Willie Fritz is going to bring talent in, but he don't have it there yet in year one of his tenure. Next team on the list is BYU. Sorry, BYU fans. I love you. A lot of respect for you. But I just don't think you're there yet. I think you go 2-10 overall with 1-8 in the league, with your only win coming the last game of the year at home against Houston. Not an easy schedule for BYU, and I still think they don't. I'm still not convinced they have the talent to compete in the Big 12 from a depth perspective. Still too many questions at quarterback. They did bring Gary Bohannon in, who, if you remember, he played it better a couple of years ago. And they have Jake Retzlaff, who I saw play last year against West Virginia. I'm high on Jake Retzlaff, but I just don't know if he has a talent. He or Bohannon, either one, have the talent around them to compete in the Big 12 just yet. But we all know Kalani Sitake's a good coach. So who knows? He may overachieve this year and do better than expected. But as of now, I have BYU going 2-10 overall, 1-8 in Big 12 play to be a well team in this conference. And then the other team I have going 1-8 in conference play is Arizona State. A lot of rebuilding at Arizona State. Kenny Dillingham will be in year 2 of his tenure. I still think they're at least 1 or 2 years away from having the talent they need to compete at the Power 5 level. He's made a lot of moves in the transfer portal. I actually have them going 3-9 overall with wins over Wyoming and at home, Texas State on the road. And then I have their lone conference win at home against BYU. And again, I just favored the home team there. But outside of that, I just don't see them being ready this year. But again, not an indictment on the program, but an indictment on the coaching staff. I just don't think they're there yet. They went through that scandal and all those NCAA violations under Herm Edwards, and I think it's going to take time to get them back on the right track after that. So again, not throwing shade at them or anything. They're still a year or two away. But there is my tier list. I have Utah as the top shelf team in the conference, finishing 11-1 overall and 8-1 in the Big 12. I have Iowa State, Kansas State, Oklahoma State, and TCU all going 7-2 in league play. One of those teams will be in Arlington, in my opinion, to play against Utah. In the conversation, I have West Virginia, Kansas, and Arizona all finishing 6-3 in the conference. I have pretenders of UCF, Cincinnati, and Baylor. Those teams will either finish 4-5 or 3-6 in the conference. Bottom shelf teams, I have Texas Tech and Colorado. I have them winning only 2 games in conference play. Just think they're not there yet from a talent perspective, and their schedules are tough. And then I have the well of the league, teams winning only 1 or 0 games as Houston, BYU, and Arizona State. Let me know what you think in the comment section. Who do you think is top shelf and who do you think is well and anything in between? Anything you want to tell me, I would love to hear it in the comments. This video went a little longer than I anticipated, but I appreciate you sticking with me. Hopefully you enjoyed it. I want to give a shout out to my channel, my VIP channel members of this episode. You've seen their names scrolling along the bottom of the screen along the way, but they are brand new member first, James Matheny. James, thank you for joining and becoming a VIP member. Also want to give a shout out to TS, Brandon Bailey, and Shannon Miller. Thank you all for your VIP membership. If you want to join that club, hit join below or go to my channel homepage and hit join there beside my channel homepage. Shout out to my sponsor, Cats, Cantor, Stone Street, and Buckner. Also want to remind you that I am an affiliate for ONIT Athlete Trading Cards. If you want to support your favorite student athletes, help them make a little NIL money, go to ONIT Athlete Trading Card link in my description box. Click the link, buy yourself some trading cards. Your favorite team is probably available. So go to the link, see if your team's available, buy yourself some trading cards, and I'll make a small commission from any sale you make with that link. You can also check out this video that's in the top corner of your screen right here. Thanks for tuning into this episode of Couz's Corner. Have a top shelf day and cue country roads.